Alright guys, here going to be putting together a DC1 conversion kit for the B6.3. We have all of the stuff that comes in the kit right here, and then this right here is going to be the front and rear assemblies from the B6 put together exactly as the instructions from Associated say. The only thing you're going to do differently is instead of mounting it onto the B6 chassis, you're going to be mounting it on to this stuff here. So first thing I like to do is start with the rear suspension. We're going to take the rear chassis standoff plate along with the 8mm countersink screws and 8mm hex standoffs. First thing I like to do is get the hex standoffs mounted to the chassis plate first. That way you can just bolt everything straight to here, the rear end, as well as bolt this straight to the main chassis. So this is the side that the transmission and rear suspension is going to contact with. It has a cutout here for transmission as well as some of the rear mounting hardware. So easiest way to do things is take your countersink screws, drop them in to the holes with the countersinks in them, and just thread on, start threading on your hex standoffs, just like that. So you have a total of 8 hex standoffs, and you have 16 screws. So you really don't need to over tighten these. I tend to not even use the hex driver. Just hand tight seems to be enough torque to hold these on and keep them from wobbling around and keeping them tight. Now, one thing is on the back here, on these two holes, these two bumps, see there aren't any countersinks. That's where these two button head screws go. These just allow for a little bit of extra holding power on the standoff plate, where the countersink would actually lose some material and not be able to hold that on as well. But as you can see, this is the orientation for the hex standoffs, and you can see the side of the plate that they are mounted on. Once you've done that, you still have 8 more countersink screws. These will be the ones that attach it to the chassis, but before you do that, you'll want to attach your rear suspension assembly to the plate itself, to its standoff. Now, this is the assembly and how far together it's been assembled. It is a little bit loosey-goosey. There's nothing holding, no screws or anything holding the arms together, so you want to be careful when you're, once you get to this point, that things can come apart fairly easily and make for a fiddly job. So the thing I like to do is stand everything up upside down like so. You take your chassis standoff plate, and there's 2 dowel pin holes that fit right on the front hinge pin bar right there. Okay, so when you're ready, like to set this thing up upside down like so. Take your chassis standoff plate. This is the rear of the plate, so we're gonna go this side down, drop that onto those pins, which line up just like so, and you're ready to put in the original screws from Associated that mount the transmission to the chassis. These are M3 by 0.5 screws, a couple different lengths. We have 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and 18 millimeter. And these will then attach your transmission and rear suspension assembly to the carbon standoff plate. So we're going to put the shortest of the screws, looks like an 8 millimeter, in first. These thread into the hinge pin bar, nice and easy. Nice aluminum threads there. Next, taking the kind of middle size pin, we're going to start threading these into the chassis or into the transmission. That'll allow us to kind of let this thing go. It gives it a little bit more rigidity once you get some screws in there. Now this is the longest screw of the three. We're gonna put that into the rear holes. Again, longest one goes into the rearmost hole. And then medium sized, which I believe is a 10, maybe a 12, will go in one of the forward holes here. And now your transmission and rear suspension are attached to your chassis standoff plate. I do prefer to have the suspension, the struts, dampers loose. You can take them fully off. Makes it a little bit easier to fit, just because you don't have to fight the springs and the compression. So now that it's all attached to the standoff, we can easily put these back on. And again, all of this stuff here on the rear suspension and transmission is original Associated stuff. All right, now you have your suspension attached to the carbon fiber chassis standoff. You can mount it directly to the chassis itself. Again, easier if you just flip it upside down. Again, the chassis upside down as well. You'll see that there's countersink holes on the bottom, and this is where you use the rest of those 8 millimeter countersink screws. So the rearmost hex standoffs will be going into the rearmost holes. The rearmost hex standoffs will be going into the rearmost holes, and then the rest line up perfectly. So you can just pop these guys in, and almost done. All right, and that is associated rear suspension and transmission mounted to carbon fiber chassis. Now we'll move on to the front suspension. This is the point at which we have assembled the associated front suspension and bulkhead. You can see here that we have cut the original part. The extra bit that comes off is not necessary and is in the way, and in fact standard mounting position would be like this, having your left and your right, but with our kit we are actually reversing the suspension, so it's an unnecessary and kind of in the way bit if you look at it like that. So we like to cut all of this plastic off here. So like I said, the front suspension is reversed, and so in this bag here we have our two reverse knuckles and our chassis, or our front bulkhead and chassis spacer and compensator here. So in order to save some time, I have another set of the knuckles already set up with the associated bushings and axle, and, already pre-assembled. It's got the associated turnbuckle and ball studs in there, and everything fits right into the associated C-hubs. So in order to attach the front suspension assembly to the carbon fiber chassis, requires these two carbon fiber pieces right here, the compensator and spacer, and these 4 20mm countersink screws. So easiest way to do things is you have one piece with 2 slightly larger holes. These will line up onto your associated bulkhead and pop into place like so. This piece then makes contact with the rest of the suspension there, and then the second thicker carbon fiber piece with with all 4 holes that are the same goes on the bottom there. and you can see that one side is slightly offset further than the other from the edge. The larger edge is going to be going to the front. And so when we will get this attached to the chassis, this is a little bit of a fiddly operation just because you're trying to hold quite a few loose pieces together all at the same time. What I like to do is pre-insert a screw into, go with the forwardmost hole here. The great thing about a modular chassis like this is you can decide your wheelbase by where you want to mount the front suspension, front bulkhead. So we'll go with the most forward position here, and we can easily just drop the carbon fiber piece on there. In fact, we'll even throw in a second screw on the bottom there. Now I am holding the screws in from the bottom, otherwise they will fall out. These will then allow us to line up our other holes. Once they are lined up, by keeping some pressure down, we can flip the chassis and start to thread these in. Once those are threaded in, makes life easy with the next two screws. There you go, front suspension attached to the chassis. Again, I like to have the struts either off or loose like this so you don't have to fight the pressure from the springs. We can easily then get those screwed on, just loosely for now. Make sure you tighten those up properly. Okay, so now we're going to be mounting the reverse knuckles. These use all of the associated bearings, axles, ball studs, and turnbuckles. They are marked left and right, whereas now your C-hubs are going to be flipped. The right side will say left, and the left side will say right. Ours say right, it's meant to be on the right, and left to be used on the left. So again, we're going to be using all of the associated equipment and hardware to mount the reverse knuckles. reversed, we'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Alright. Now you have your front and rear suspension attached to your chassis. Next up will be the servo mount and the servo horn. Get the arms out of the way. Now, with the modular chassis, depending on your mounting of the front bulkhead, gives you a couple different options for mounting your servo. We have ours mounted in the most forward position, which pushes the servo up as far forward as possible. So, to mount this to the chassis, again, you can flip it on over, and we will then take 4 of our 8mm countersink screws, and tighten this bad boy up. Again, 8mm countersink screws. And that secures the servo mount to the chassis. This allows for you to drop in your servo. There's another 4 8mm button head screws for you to attach your servo to the mount. Tighten these down, don't need to go too tight. And there you go. There's your servo attached at the front of the vehicle. Now, the servo horn comes in a couple different pieces. You have the 25 tooth horn here and the link in which to attach your steering arms. Now, it is slightly easier if you have your ball stud off the arm. Makes it easier to screw on. Do that for the other side as well. Okay. So, what we found is that if you take the flat surface here and the ball studs facing down, and the link making contact with that flat surface, you basically get 0 bump steer. Now these screws are a little bit, that hold these two together, are a little bit different. These are a flathead screw. Just take your flathead driver and tighten those down. Like so. Now that can be placed on your servo. You can snap your arms back onto it. Place there on the servo, and 4mm button head screw to hold it down. There you go. Next up is battery mount. Again, great thing about being a modular chassis is you have many positions where you can orient your battery. Doesn't matter how you want to have it. All about weight displacement, and it's up to you to choose. Again, easiest way is flipping the chassis upside down. We have 4 10mm countersink screws, and basically just line up whatever holes you want, and you can start attaching your battery mount. There you go. You have battery mount attached. Go in any orientation depending on any cables that you may have. And comes with one set of rubber bands to hold it down and a hook. Comes with one set already attached and an extra set of rubber bands in case of in case they break. You won't be set out, you know, if you're at the track. But go ahead and pop your battery in. And big thing about this chassis is being modular, so you can adjust depending on size of your battery. And just like that, you have a nice, clean, simple looking battery mount. The next step is going to be aluminum side pods for your ESC and capacitors. So each kit comes with 2 aluminum side pods and 6mm countersink screws. So once again, flip this bad boy over, take the side pods, may have to flip them, find the right orientation for the cutouts here in the chassis. These are threaded, so no worries there. Go in nice and easy. Other side. Just like that. You have side pods on there. Move your electronics further back. Now lastly is wheelie bar stuff. So what we have here is wheelie bar mount. Set up to run a strut, a damper for your wheelie bar, and then the brace that triangulates everything onto the chassis. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the brace and we're going to take these 2 20mm button head screws, and they are going to replace the 2 screws that normally attach the transmission and the rear camber arm bar. So we can go ahead and drop these screws right through, line them up with the holes, and they thread right in. Alright, next up is mounting a wheelie bar mount. Easy enough to just slide it in. Line up your 3 holes on the top and your 5 holes on the bottom. We can go ahead and start with the bottom holes. There are 5 countersink 10mm screws that will hold the wheelie bar onto the chassis. Alright, once you've completed those, flip it over and take the 3 8mm button head screws, and you can attach the brace and the mount together. The remaining 4 screws, 4 12mm button head screws. These are for the side and are meant to attach whatever wheelie bar you may have to the wheelie bar mount. Other than that, this is the basic kit.